Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a minute. I think I'll bring this down a little bit. Thank you. Welcome to one of the Blue Sage's most beloved traditions, the Harvest of Voices. I'm Allie Lightfoot. I'm the executive director at the Blue Sage, and the Harvest of Voices was actually the first thing that I ever went to at the Blue Sage when I moved here the first time in 2008. And even though I really didn't know anyone, I felt like I knew everyone after hearing them read that evening, and I felt like I was in the right community. And I've been to other communities that don't do this. And I'm telling you, they're missing out, because a community that celebrates the stories of our neighbors is a really special thing. And it's the way that I think we bond and understand each other. It's the way that friendships are built. It's the oldest form of entertainment, and I think it still completely holds up. And so it's a really special event to me, and I'm glad that it's so popular, because we need to thank people for supporting this kind of thing, because if they don't support it, it doesn't really exist. I wanted to also thank so many of the people who've stepped up over the years to help this organization, the Blue Sage Center for the Arts. We're coming up on our 30-year anniversary. Yep, the nonprofit was formed in 1996. And, it's one of the older arts organizations in the area, and I can tell you that there have been a lot of people who've come along to save it over the years, or stepped up in some way to lift this organization up financially, or help build something new here. And there are some people doing that right now. It's still happening. We have Sage Alley happening in the back there. I want to just thank everyone who comes here for all the things that we gather for here, our events, our classes, our community meetings, our concerts, our Free Friday shows. You know how important it is to us. What happens here is valuable to our community, and I'd like to ask all of you to commit as a member of the Blue Sage if you're not. We sort of reconstituted the membership. You can find out all about it on page 2 of your program. It's really sort of how we keep this thing humming along. We've received some very generous gifts to finish the Sage Alley project, which is very exciting. It's scheduled to be done in May. We also got a grant to upgrade our sound system and a bunch of other things here in Curtis Hall. So the next time you come to Harvest of Voices, you're gonna see some beautiful new additions and upgrades. And we've had a lot of support for youth programming through grants. We're seeing some incredible engagement and interest with the next generation of artists and leaders. They're starting to come in here and volunteer and take part, which is very exciting. We had over 30 events since I arrived. So, they were already scheduled. It's not me. But the Blue Sage is really busy, and with a very small staff of 2 and a few board members who are moving as fast as we can, literally, to rise to the occasion. We really need community support as well for operations to continue here. Grants don't usually cover that part of it, so that's the staff, the maintenance, the office supplies, blah, 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 the boring things that all businesses and nonprofits need to maintain and continue these 2 beautiful buildings as well. There's a lot of things that we need to do to keep them shipshape. So please consider joining as a member today. You can do it for as little as $5 a month if your budget is tight, and you can always ask us about it too if you want us to help you get signed up. And I want to thank our sponsors, the Bross Hotel and Colorado Creative Industries, for their support. That's how we made this event happen. To these incredible writers who submitted their stories. And I have to tell you that, all the judging is anonymous. Nobody sees, the judges don't know who the writers don't know who the judges are. You don't know if the judge or the writers are male or female, so it's totally by accident that Steve Harper is the only male reader this evening. They scored 64 entries. That's a lot of reading, and I can tell you that they enjoyed it. And I think a lot of the stories are very memorable, as they always are. I want to thank the Blue Sage Literary Committee for helping to organize this event and many other literary events in the area. I want to thank the volunteers who spent all this time today making this place beautiful. Candace Orlando for donating our beautiful bouquets, and Sally, Kane, Lynn Weatherall, everybody that stepped up to make it really lovely in here this evening. Logan and Annalie are bartenders, and they also made the moon rise. Annalie made the moon in the window, so they were on moon duty, and they really stepped up. Poppy Lightfoot helped with decorations as well, and she's here taking pictures tonight. Poppy's my daughter. I dragged her into this, but thank you, Poppy. Emily Sinclair, Carol Kwiatkowski for all the work they've done behind the scenes, and of course you, the audience, for being here tonight. And now I would like to introduce our MC for this evening's presentation. Born in Paonia and raised in small towns all across the U.S., Taya J. returned to her birthplace 8 years ago. Taya holds a BA in Sociocultural Anthropology from Bennington College and a graduate certificate in audio storytelling from the Salt Institute for Documentary Studies. When she's not hosting and producing The Pen and the Sword and talking music for KVNF, as well as a bunch of other, anytime you hear an incredible interview, it's usually Taya. She can be found cultivating her plant nursery, collecting rocks, or adventuring somewhere with her pup. She's a great reader and writer herself, and we're so pleased that she could join us this evening. Welcome to the stage, Taya J.
There's nothing more intimidating than hearing your bio read to you. I now have lots of empathy for our readers up here. Good evening, and thank you so much for attending Harvest of Voices. Harvest of Voices is my absolute favorite event of the season. There is nothing more potent and powerful and ancient than gathering together to share stories. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate the bounty of this season and to kick off this weekend's festivities than this event. Allie mentioned many thank yous and expressed a lot of gratitude. I would like to express some gratitude for Allie, for all she is doing for this organization. She has stepped in with so much grace to honor its history and to think about the ways that we creatively want to move it into the future. And I am in awe of the work that she is doing here. So thank you for everything that you do. We have 12 readers this evening. 6 will go in the first half, and then we'll take an intermission. We'll close out with 6 in the second half. Please remember, if you haven't done so already, to turn off your cell phones, and if you need to leave for any reason during the event, if you will just wait for the transition between readers. Poet and writer Wendell Berry says, "It is not from ourselves that we learn to be better than we are." Tonight, I invite you to approach these poems and essays and stories with an open mind, to hold space for these 12 community members who have courageously stepped up to share their stories with us this evening, and to see what you might learn about both yourself and those around you. It is my pleasure to announce our first reader. Emily Shoff is a writer and teacher in Telluride. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, USA Today, and Outside Online, and in journals such as Red Rock Review, Deep Wild, and Solstice Lit. She is currently writing a novel, The Dead Love Us, about a grieving woman who travels to Mexico and meets a healer who can elicit ghosts. Let's welcome to the stage Emily Shoff.
Thanks, Taya, and thanks, Allie, and thanks all of Blue Stage for organizing this event. I feel really honored to be up here with these amazing writers. I've been trying to get this story right for years, and I'm still not sure if I have. I probably first scribbled it down in a journal while living in East Africa as a junior in college. But unlike the hundreds of entries that happily rested in peace during that time, this one didn't die. Rather, it seemed to have its own heartbeat and would call to me, asking me to work on it. But I could never figure out what it was saying. Originally, the story was called Kuchizi, or crazy in Swahili, because someone did scream that at me once. But it wasn't until recently, in my 40s, when someone in an MFA course offered an I regret prompt, that this story found the right channel to float. And I discovered it wasn't necessarily about one moment, but about the many selves and people and places I've left behind. All that I left behind. I regret leaving Tanzania early that year, the green hills falling from me like years as I rose in the plane. I thought I was tough, and that being tough meant ignoring everything I loved. I regret I spent Christmas Day wandering the streets of Zanzibar, never inviting anyone else to come along. I regret that later I vomited in the Central Market, gripping stones that had felt the souls of slaves, never to touch their homes again. And that later, when I tried to stand, the heat and the spices and the call of prayer pressed in at my sides, and I vomited again. I was embarrassed for my race, for all that we'd done and continued to do, landing in places where people never left, though they wanted to, always asking me about friends they had in New York. Did I know them? Searching for connections in an intractable world. I regret I never called you on Christmas Day, didn't join the Westerners lining outside the telecom office. Your voice would have held me when later I slept on the concrete floor of the hostel bathroom and dreamed of the Christmases I'd had as a child. My father stacking wood onto the fire as my mother drew bread from the oven, mountains of gifts spilling from the tree. The six of us opening and opening until only the piles of shredded paper and discarded ribbon reminded us of who we'd been merely hours before. I regret I never thanked the woman who pulled me off that bathroom floor and urged me to drink tea. Chai moto, she said, it will make you better. And although Zanzibar was the hottest place I'd ever been, I could not get warm, nor say a thing, and shivered in my bed and dreamed the mosquito net draped over me was a shroud, shielding me from view until my burial. I regret that when I awoke sweating, the fever now running its opposite course, I decided to cut off all my hair. The brown waves crashing over my feet like a river exploding over its banks. That I got angry with the street side barber when he refused to finish the job. Please, I told him, I'm just so hot. He called me crazy to his friends, Kuchizi, but ran the blade over my head anyways. I regret I didn't call you then to tell you I was sick, that something greater than I understood was gnawing away at me, my head now gleaming like the underbelly of a fish, that I wasn't eating because I wanted to know what emptiness felt like. I regret I didn't open the Christmas package you'd sent me. I was embarrassed by the way we'd broken up, by the way my heart still oozed like one of those street mangoes burst open from a fall. I had waited for over 2 hours in that Nairobi post office, people pushing up against the backs of my knees, always asking, "Excuse me, miss, you are from what country?" Passing diaperless babies for me to hold, my new bald head dripping sweat into my eyes, onto my cheeks, over my body, so fleshy and large. Still, I waited to break open the small padded envelope until I'd ridden 3 different matatus, until I'd walked into the guest house garden, waved to the one-handed gardener, the other chopped off for stealing, to the other students on the program who were having another cup of chai and thought I was crazy, which I was, lopping off all my hair and having a man on the street whose razor could have been anywhere shave my head. I waited till I was in my room alone. And there I ran my lips over the envelope, imagining every part of your body that had touched that package before opening it. You sent me a journal, small and industrial, for gathering my thoughts, you said. The letter attached was smooth and cool and soothing, and I worked it over my scalp, which I'd burnt in the Indian Ocean, the blisters now erupting like thorns. Inside, your words were ordinary, your response to the lion kill I'd seen on safari, thoughtful and basic, nothing like the letter you'd sent me when we were together, where you likened the feel of my breasts to bread dough. I regret I never wrote you back, and instead let your love for me dissolve into dust, which without an anchor blew out into the world and vanished. I regret that when I flew home early and we met up in Boston, I said you made me unhappy. I regret that later, when we pushed up against the walls of your living room, never even making it to the bedroom, I dismissed it, blaming it on my body, our bodies. That was before I learned to listen to my heart. I regret that afterwards, when we fell asleep in your bed, curling around each other like children who have been out in the fields, running all day, we ever left. The cold that met us at the front door should have been enough to push us back. The snow was stacked like wolves in the streets, and I was still wearing a kanga, as if holding on to East Africa would save me. I regret that when we said goodbye at the bus, the wind blowing through us and cutting our skin like glass, I only hugged you with one arm. I was holding my bag in the other, but couldn't be troubled to put that down. We'd been together for 3 years. You'd been my first love, the only one in my life who ever made me feel like I was coming home. And I hugged you with one arm, patting your back lightly before stepping out onto that bus and heading west to find myself. I have never been warm again.
We do not regret that you made it here tonight, Emily. Thank you. Anna Mettler is our next reader. Now in her 8th year of Western Slope living, Anna has savored Paonia's culinary and cultural smorgasbord. She believes in the power and possibilities of a community that dances, sings, eats, gardens, and reads together. Her energy and spirit are nourished in the stillness and expanse of the Dobies and Mount Lambourne's steadfast presence. Please welcome Anna Mettler reading The Timing of Friendship.
Hello. The Timing of a Friendship is a nonfiction piece of writing, and so it's local, it's not in Africa. So I changed the names a little bit, but some of you might recognize yourselves. And it is dedicated to Karen and Frank. The Timing of a Friendship. Somewhere I had heard that in Colorado you can be buried in your own backyard. Is that true? I asked Constance, who is on the board of the local Green Burial Committee. If your property is large enough, she says. How many acres do you have? 35? So the answer is yes, you can do it. She leaves me with a packet of information which I tuck away for review sometime in the distant future. In April, we see movement at the house on the next 35-acre plot. For months, it had been sitting empty, When you live in sparsely populated rural America, you want to know who your new neighbors will be. Courteously and curiously, we walk over to welcome them. Francine and Ken, an elderly couple, are delighted to meet us. Aided by a cane, Ken moves around gingerly in small and cautious steps. Pulmonary fibrosis, Francine explains. When we're ready to head home, we assure them, please don't hesitate to call us if you need anything. 24 hours later, Francine texts, help, locked ourselves out. Do you know of any locksmiths? The nearest locksmith is 30 miles away, plus it is the weekend. Is there any other way of getting into the house? Francine discovers an open window on the 3rd floor. Bring a tall ladder, she writes. My husband and I walk the long dirt road over to their house, shouldering our tallest ladder. It barely reaches up to the open window. Francine, Ken, and I hold our breaths and the ladder as we watch my husband climb up, carefully open the window screen, and hooray, we shout, enter the house. A great way to meet new neighbors, we laugh, break into their house. Ken is not amused. Embarrassing, he mumbles and disappears into the house. Francine texts the following day, what do you like to eat? We're invited for dinner as a thanks for the rescue. Ken, as frail as he is, has dressed up for the occasion, suit, tie, and shine shoes. And even he is chuckling now in retrospect about our unconventional version of get to know your new neighbors. We want to reciprocate the dinner invitation, but Ken is already getting too weak to walk over to our house. We decide to bring the dinner over instead. Chicken cooked in homemade plum sauce, vanilla ice cream with huckleberries. Ken loves it. He suggests that we toast with his favorite drink, limoncello and vodka. Here is to good food and good neighbors, he says. All summer long, we have more dinners, talk about teaching and saddle making, geodesic domes, and when to harvest garlic. But each time we gather, Ken's voice becomes fainter, the effort of talking more and more daunting for him. Closer and closer I lean towards him as he whispers. By September, the speaking, the words, the mutuality of conversation, it all has diminished so much that it is mostly the presence with each other we seek. Do you happen to know anything about green burials? Francine asks me. I retrieve the informational packet Constance had given me. On the last day of October, I happen to look out the kitchen window when I see a giant backhoe being pulled up the road. Shocked, I text Francine. Come over, she writes back. Ken's breathing stops and starts, his body a surrender of skin and bones resting on a hospital bed in the living room. The window is slightly opened with a view of the late autumn sun, lavishly spilling liquid copper and gold over the adobe hills. Ken mutters something. Are you hungry? Francine asks. He moves his head. No. Do you want something to drink? He nods. Water? No. Juice? No. Limoncello? He nods. He sips a few drops of his favorite drink and a smile flits over his face like the shadow of a bird flying by. On the 5th of November, the women of the family and I gently wrap his body in a simple white shroud, its large hood first covering the top of his head and then his eyes. We lay flowers atop his heart. The men carefully lift his body onto the pall and carry it outside to the backyard. We all follow into the rolling hills of sagebrush and shale. There we lower Ken's body into the freshly dug hole. We read poems, we share memories, we are silent. We toss flowers and green boughs and toast with limoncello. Some evenings now, Francine and I sit quietly on the couch in front of the bay window. breathing in the stillness of the landscape, savoring the view of the mountain, the adobe hills, and Ken's grave, luminous in the setting sun. With a nod to him, we raise our glasses. How lucky we are to have found each other as neighbors and friends in the nick of time.
Thank you, Anna Mettler. Our next reader is Carol Kwiatkowski. Carol is a health scientist, writer, and mother of two. She considers every piece of inspired writing a gift to be treasured and does her best to shape them into stories to be shared. She is currently loving life with her boyfriend, Paul, and enjoying watching her two children make their way in the world as young adults. Let's welcome Carol to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. I wasn't nervous until like 2 seconds ago. So, this story comes with a little warning. It is a somewhat graphic story about a traffic accident. And so, in light of a couple days ago where a bicyclist was killed just around the corner, I just wanted to let people know in case you want to step out for the story. Yeah, just go from there. This is called Giovanni. The winding route of I-70 along the Colorado River through the rocky cliffs of Glenwood Canyon can be mesmerizing. This sunny July day was no exception, as my partner and I headed into the last hour of a 2-week vacation. We were ready to be home. As we rounded another bend, a motorcycle sped by, passing us on the left, and then swinging in front of us to pass the next car on the right. He was also enjoying the sway of the road. As his bike tilted left into the curve, my body leaned with him. Together we felt the tipping point and gently began to push upright. But suddenly, his rear tire hit a patch of gravel, and in a cloud of dust, the bike slams into the concrete barrier, and he is thrown into our lane, spinning horizontally, bouncing down the road like a rag doll. Oh, shit, I whisper as we come to a stop behind him. Call 911. I open my car door, my heart racing. The scene feels surreal, almost dreamlike. My instincts are competing for command of time. Act quickly, but move slowly. I have no idea what I'm approaching, and I have no more medical skills than an actor on Grey's Anatomy. But I'm being drawn in, guided even. Lying on his back in head-to-toe black motorcycle gear is a boy in his mid-20s. His blank stare reflects the blue sky above as a dark red pool of blood forms behind his shock of black hair. His body is the perfect form of a crime scene chalk outline, one arm bent up, the other straight, one leg turned slightly outward. His chest heaves and foamy white bubbles gurgle from his mouth. Something tells me he needs to feel my touch, so I grab his left wrist, the only skin I can see. I try to lock eyes with him. Look at me, I say loudly. You're hurt, but stay with me. I keep repeating, stay with me, as I stare into his eyes and massage his wrist, not daring to move anything else for fear of paralyzing him. A woman arrives and I plead, do you have any idea what to do? She whispers, I'm a physician. Oh, thank God. I jump up and hand the situation to her, thinking I'm done. She leans over and feels his chest. Then I notice a 2-inch flap of scalp dangling from his head just above his right ear. Should we compress this to stop the bleeding? I ask. The physician nods. I turn to get a cloth and see a man approaching from behind my car. He stops, crouches, gently sets something on the shoulder of the road, then darts off. It is a fully formed human arm. Bent at the elbow, hand curled into a tight fist. I turn back to the boy and see his right sleeve is empty. A tear in the fabric reveals the stump where his arm was ripped off and flung down the road. I am flooded with questions. How did I miss this? Why does it look surgically removed, a ragged but straight cross-sectional cut? Why is there no blood? Do you think we should tourniquet this? I asked the physician. And then just then a stocky man with red hair shows up and says, "I have rope," and darts off. While I press a t-shirt to the boy's head, others begin approaching. People showing up for this moment in time at this place on the planet. The physician hasn't spoken, so I continue to prompt things I could only have learned on TV. I wave over a tall man with long black curls who arrived with first aid supplies from his camper. He has seen the arm. I ask gently, "Do you think we should put that on ice?" He nods solemnly. He knows what I'm asking. After finding a cooler bag and an ice pack, he approaches the arm, inhales deeply, crosses himself, and transfers it, which is also strangely not bleeding at all. As the physician wraps the stump in gauze, the boy begins to wake up. He's writhing and flailing his left arm, which I have now pinned to the ground. He is strong and he can move. These must be good signs. Others kneel around him to keep his body still. A laying of hands by a hushed circle of reverent ushers, unsure if we're guiding him into or out of this world. A young woman asks if we should find his cell phone. We run 20 yards down the road to his battered bike. In seconds, she pulls up his emergency contact through the crushed screen of his phone. I dash to the circle of attendants. "His name is Giovanni." Nobody responds. I insist, "Call him Giovanni." I relieve an older woman, exhausted from restraining his arm. I remove his glove and wrap my hand around his. He squeezes hard, and what was restraint becomes strength and compassion. The paramedics finally arrive. The tourniquet probably saved his life, one says. Later, I learned that accidental amputations can trigger hemostasis, where the blood vessels immediately contract to reduce blood loss. Then the ambulance speeds away, and the most extraordinary half hour of my life ends as suddenly as it began. Looking back, I wonder, who was this moment meant for? I imagine the experience rippling through all of our lives. Perhaps the man who transferred the arm decides to quit his Costco job and train to be an EMT. He'd be good at it. The physician expands her trauma training and saves other lives. And the young woman shares the story online, crowdsourcing worldwide prayers for Giovanni's healing. And me, I gain trust that in any situation, the strength and wisdom I need in the moment will be there for me. This belief is incredibly freeing and makes me confident and brave in new and unexpected ways. And I write this story, sharing it, perhaps to someday reach Giovanni, so that in the dark days of his recovery, he will know the love the world holds for him.
Thank you, Carol, for reminding us that community takes shape in many forms. Our next reader is Madison Gill Silva. Madison is a poet from Montrose who is working toward her certification as a master gardener, mostly to give her houseplants a better life. A self-proclaimed love poet, her first book of poems, Casualties of Honey, was published last year. She and her husband built a tiny house on wheels together, which they live in with their cat. Please welcome to the stage Madison with Wild Aster.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me. So as we just discussed, I am in the process of becoming a master gardener. And I wrote this poem kind of around the time that that journey was starting. So that's a little bit of context. I hope you enjoy it. It's called Wild Aster. The prettiest pale purple petaled flowers sprung up from the patches of weeds, climbing the old fence post that holds up my birdhouse. Wild aster, exclaims my mother, giving name in one glance to the blossoms I've admired anonymously for weeks. Sometimes it feels like the world around me is a book written in a language I don't understand. A condition that is neither blindness nor muteness, but some infuriating combination of the two. The trees, weeds, and flowers all blurring together in one nameless mass. I want to be able to tell the clover from the oxeye, from the tansy. I want to know the mountains by their ancient names. I wish I had paid more attention to my mother, prattling off the various wildflowers growing along the roadside as we drove past, instead of slipping in an earphone, tuning her out. I didn't know what a gift she was giving me, each another petal or pebble with which to become better acquainted with the natural world. I should have kept a basket to catch them in as she tossed them over her shoulder. She doesn't do it as often anymore. So let this be the start of my own collection. Let these be the first 2 words learned of the world's secret tongue, a language my mother and I can finally speak to each other in. Wild aster. Thank you.
Thank you, Madison. May we all remember to become better acquainted with the natural world. And our mothers. Pretty sure that was mine. Our next reader is Betsy Marston. Betsy Marston has been a journalist all her life, most recently as editor and columnist for High Country News. Now she's editing the fact-based nonprofit opinion service Writers on the Range. It is a labor of love, she says, and that's always a good thing. Let's welcome to the mic Betsy Marston with Life at 84.
To illustrate my poem, My Bound Wrist, from a trip and fall on Jumbo. Just a little hairline fracture. But really, this poem is a shout out to Paonia, where I've lived for 50 years as of this month. Thank you. Infirmities, indignities, just when you need an arm or a leg, suddenly the body has other things to do. It's an affront, really. Weak hands, thin skin, forgetful brain. Why is the body shouting about itself? It's giving way just when I need it most. No one warned me about this loss-a-day regime of the old. No one mentioned how it drives you inward, makes you timid. No one admitted aging was a series of defeats, one after the other. Today, though, unfolded a small triumph. I woke up and nothing squawked or clamored for relief. all my various parts meshing, a walk was called for. The dog agreed, ears perked, and off we trundled onto a trail that took us along a ditch. It looked like a stream, down a steep road and into town. Along the way, we met people we liked. We caught up on local news and picked up mail. After which, we ate a little lunch, then reversed ourselves, coming back well pleased with a good day. Ah, there's life in this old dame yet, I thought. There's life in the old dame yet.
Thank you, Betsy. We wish you a speedy recovery. Our final reader for the first half is Amanda Kettenring. Amanda Kettenring is a mother, writer, aerialist, former teacher, and nature lover. She and her family recently moved to Paonia and feel like they have stumbled into paradise. She is very excited and plenty nervous to be reading in this year's Harvest of Voices. Amanda Kettenring brings us The Trick is Not to Fall. Let us welcome her to the mic.
Hello, everybody. Those last words were very true. I'm very nervous, so bear with me. This was a piece that I wrote actually originally as a poem and turned it into a essay/story, and that's what I'm going to tell you about. So, the trick is not to fall. I am a cliff walker, an odd purebred born of sea-level walking parents. My cliff walking lineage is a mystery, but my blood is true. I've known this for a long time, but here's the thing. I am a cliff walker, and I'd rather be anything else. I've been walking my particular cliff edge for 35 years, well, closer to 40 really, but I didn't have the sense to look up and take in my broader surroundings for a while. I was too enthralled in my fresh new body with the way my fingers moved and the way the light cut shapes out of the tree branches, and the ants followed one another in a long line over my discarded watermelon rinds. Anyway, 35 years. If you've ever been on a drive up a mountain road before, the kind where there's barely room for one car, and the dirt edge drops off shockingly to the side of you, and you cross all your fingers and toes that no one comes careening around a corner from the opposite direction, you'll know the kind of cliff edge I'm talking about. World-class views, mind-numbing, low-level, constant panic. This is the path my feet have trod, the path I have called my home on this earth. Sometimes, for large, blessed swaths of time, towers of beautiful years, I've forgotten where I am. At these times, I've enjoyed the way the swallowtails have floated around my face. I have watched the hawks in their wide arc over the world. I have laughed at doors that opened in ways I didn't expect and lost my mind over small inconveniences. I have felt the smooth stones at my feet that hold the heat of the day long into the night. I have heard the chickadees and the blackbirds and sung out myself for the senseless joy of it all. I've had companions too, better companions I can't imagine, and we've walked together for years at a time. Most of them haven't noticed the drop, though I don't understand how. They've smiled calmly, talked about the girl their brother is dating and the dinner they made last night, as if these topics are the things that actually occupy their minds. I marvel at them, my sea-level friends, and their skill for presence, for easy chatter. Not I. I walk the cliff edge and let the edge become my mantra. The stomach-suffocating drop, miles of air between here and the ground below, the desperate couple of inches between my feet and all that sucks my air away. And because of this obsession with the edge, for 35 years, I have clung octopus-like to anything that could keep me from falling. Posts or large rocks or bits of trees I have found along the path. As a side gig, I've become not just a cliff walker, but also a devoted knot tyer. I have learned sophisticated knots, devoted myself to the art of knot tying, learned the jargon, the tone of voice of the seasoned knot tyer. My fingers have become nimble, my rope systems elaborate, impressive. I've clung also, sometimes, to people, especially to anyone who could love some small part of me. To these people, my mad cries and subtler sweet charms have all spelled out the words, love me please or I'll die. Love me please because I cannot love myself. My ropes make it hard for me to hear their response. Sometimes, on darker nights, when the moon is gone, I've done other things to make me more lovable, safer, to keep me more firmly attached to this cliff. Disfigured my body, removed limbs, even performed slow, careful operations to remove bits of my very heart. But I don't really want to talk about those times. Why am I telling you all this? Here's why. I want you to understand what it was like yesterday, what it was like on a partly cloudy, normal, dusty day, a day 35 plus years into this walk when some of my ropes had been fraying. And I had a moment, and I started to braid new ones, focused, the tentacled self I have become attached parasite-like to the cliffside. And a breeze blew, an old familiar breeze, and for no reason at all, I looked up and over my shoulder. And there, coming from my back, from a place where I have felt a mild pull every day of this cliff-walking life, I saw with my own terrified eyes something I'd never noticed before. Tell me, how have I been so blind? It looked for all the world like a wing. And I looked to my other side and saw that I had two of them. And I concentrated on where they were and found that I could move them with my mind, just like I wiggle my fingers here. And suddenly, my body was straining against these blasted ropes I've knotted around me, and my body, my tortured and scared little animal, was floating over the cliff's edge. And if you don't understand what I'm saying is that I was flying. I was flying. And I think that life is not what I thought it was at all.
Thank you, Amanda. Let's give one more round of applause for our first half of readers. Welcome back to the second half of what I believe is the 22nd Harvest of Voices, but I could be wrong. That's not verified yet, but 22 years and maybe some. I want to acknowledge our watchers over at the Paradise Theater. I know y'all get forgotten often, but it's such a blessing. This event sold out so quickly this year, and it's such a great thing that we're able to simulcast it over to the Paradise Theater. Big shout out to Bodie Gilroy for helping to make that happen. And hello to all our friends and community over at the Paradise. Thank you to Michael Cooper for helping that to happen. Starting off this second half is Marie Luna. Marie Luna is an amateur naturalist and poet of fifth-generation farming and ranching heritage on the western slope of Colorado. She has been writing poetry since a very young age. She writes about her family's experiences as they interface with the ever more rare wild plants, fungi, and creatures of the wilderness ecosystems that she inhabits. Let's welcome Marie Luna with Mother to Matter.
Thank you, Taya. And I want to put a shout out to your mother, Lisa J. I met Lisa and Taya when I first moved here many years ago, and they've always been so loving and such a beautiful part of the community. So thanks to the Jays, the Jaybirds. And to my dear friend Tara, who made these vases, who has also woven me into her weave, and I'm really grateful. Thank you. My oldest turned 40 this year, and it really prompted a lot of heartstrings and deep thoughts about my journey as a mother. And my journey as a mother has been to take my children into the wilderness as much as possible. So when I unexpectedly found myself as a single mom of a new baby, I ended up scoring a beautiful cabin in the wilderness up the West Fork of the Dolores River. And the first 3 years of my son's life was living off grid in a very primitive, beautiful cabin. And So on the occasion of his 40th birthday this year, I wrote this poem for him. Piney cinnamon of matsutake transports me to my kitchen in the cabin. We haul spring water from the outdoor cold box, pour its sweetness into our teapot, adjust the wood-fired flame, crumble thyme and mint into the vessel. Your sleeping toddler breath smells like evergreen spice. My memory of you is this: with your little bucket, fetching water from the spring, the steamy herbs, your relaxed body, sleeping by the fireplace. These images are opaque in my mind, like looking through fogged windows in August rain, but they're sharp in a mother's heart. The morning breeze is crisp and cool in the mountains. Years later, we gather perfumed chanterelles, cook them with wild turkey that he shot, his first time taking a life. The meat tastes of the woods, the creature's favorite herbs. This hen had eaten well as she roamed the pine forest. Comes a time when the children can identify 6 edible mushrooms. Our homeschool lessons of trees, rocks, herbs, wild creatures did not prepare them for the cruelty of the human world. But it gave them nature as their refuge when life broke their hearts. No parent will ever know if they did the right things, gave safety, kindness, or peril. We release our children, pollen from flowers, to land where they will. The spores shot out of a mushroom cap do not worry about where they are going. Spruce cones submit to gravity, land in mossy green duff. They do not call it a bad thing, leaving the mother. Nor does the mother, tree, grieve, for there's no loss. Soil, mineral, plant, animal, sky, stardust become matter, material, mother, me. My mushroom-shrouded body will compost into earth, an atomic fragment of existence, leaping from shape to shape, leaping from shape to shape.
Thank you, Marie Luna. Uh-oh, there we go. Thank you, Marie Luna. Our next reader is Skye Kettenring. I want to say a little note about Skye before I read her bio. This submission process isn't restricted by age, and Skye is 14. So Skye submitted amongst an entire multiple generations of fellow writers and was selected to read this evening. So I just want to acknowledge that very significant thing. Skye Kettenring is 14 years old. She spends all her free time reading, writing, and never evacuates her headphones, especially if David Bowie is playing. Let's welcome Skye with her story, My Mother Asks Me What I Know About Magic.
Okay, thank you so much. Wow. I'm wishing I made that a little bit longer. So hopefully I make it through this without collapsing. Wish me luck. My mother asks me what I know about magic. At first, I think I must be hearing a voicemail, accidentally playing something I've forgotten about from years ago. But her voice is gruffer than it used to be, scratchier, older. As I keep staring at the phone, she repeats her question, and I know this is no dream, no voicemail. I hardly know how to believe it, hardly know if I can. My mother and I haven't talked in 10 years. Long enough that Mom has become Mother, the same name only stiff and hard in my mouth, warmth and familiarity lost. 10 years is a long time, but she sure caught my attention. It's kind of evil, actually, how she's done it. She knows there's no way I can hang up now. So what do I know about magic? I could tell her I know a doorway at the back of an oak by the old barn, and it leads to a place where the trees uproot themselves and sway. Somewhere, someone plays a tsunami of notes with the passion of a lover, and leaves twist slowly to the ground like some peculiar snowstorm, as pine and willow twirl about each other. I could tell her I know a crack in the floor of my uncle's great library that opens into a room where a girl sits in a sea of wrinkled paper. Each time I go, she asks me to take a piece with me, and I do. I have 12 now. When you unfold one of the papers, you see a poem, but every time you open it, the poem is different. I could tell my mother about the train tracks at the bottom of the pond. If you catch the train, it will take you deeper than the sand, to the other side, where there's another pond identical to the first, a magical sort of reflection. The only difference is that the pond on the other side is filled with fish that light up like fireflies in a rainbow of colors. Sometimes I take the train when I can't sleep and watch them glow outside of the train window. I could tell her there's a star that will come down and visit if you ask nicely and pour her some peppermint tea. She'll even tell you a story or two if you keep the cup full. She's a terrible gossip. I could tell her about a book so old it looks like opening it would send it into pieces. But it's a door, and if you walk through it knowing and believing it is a door, you will walk into a copse of trees where 2 cottages sit. And in one of those cottages, you will find a witch. No, the witch isn't the one in the lacy black dress, and she's getting rather tired of that assumption. If you too make the mistake of asking her for a potion or spell, she'll grumble and then point you to the other cottage, where a very nice and rather spacey-looking gentleman, yes, that one with the gold curls and faraway sort of eyes, can help you with your magical needs. I could tell my mother that sometimes I press my palms into the night and the darkness purrs, that I wrung my fingers through it and it rolls and pushes closer, like some great beast succumbing to the natural instinct of belly rubs. Perhaps that is exactly what it is. I could tell her I once found out how to fly using 8 silver spoons and a honeybee. I could tell her all of these things, but instead, I tell her she has 5 minutes to tell me what's going on before I hang up, because my mother has been dead for 10 years. In response, she laughs. My mother was a bright, happy person, with laugh lines as deep as the Grand Canyon and eyes always twinkling and alive. She was always giggling at something, had even died that way. She slipped away in her sleep, laughing at a dream in between slowly fading snores. Normally, her laugh would make me smile. Right now, in answer to my question, you can understand it being a bit irritating. Mom, where are you? That's a rather dull response, she says wryly. When I stay quiet, she sighs and then says, I'm dead, obviously. Have been for a while, obviously. But can you blame an old ghost for wanting to check up on her daughter? Yes, actually I can, but I don't say that. I don't really know what to say. They don't exactly teach you the proper response to situations like this in school. Why through the phone then, I ask, for lack of a better question. It's easiest, she says simply. Well, you're sounding well, if a bit exasperated, which I don't think is entirely fair, but who am I to tell you how to feel? I'll try to check in again next decade, but don't blame me if I'm a little late. Being dead is the most relaxing thing I've ever been, and sometimes I sleep in a little. Love you. And with that, she hangs up. I stare at the phone, blank and quiet in my hand, and I start laughing. I don't even consider the fact that I could have hallucinated our conversation. No, this is exactly like my mother. I love you, Mom, I say to the dead phone, still laughing just a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you to our anonymous judges for selecting that story. And thank you to Sky for your beautiful words. Yeah. I want to acknowledge here for a moment the intentionality behind this lineup, because we have a young and up-and-coming storyteller, and we have a stalwart of storytelling coming up next, Diane Sylvain. Diane Sylvain has lived in Paonia long enough to know better, and she still refuses to go away, thank goodness. She works full-time as copy editor for High Country News and writes and edits the weekly bulletin for the North Fork Catholic community. One day, she hopes to get back into the art studio, though at this point, she'll need to borrow a machete to shack her way through the cobwebs. Let's welcome Diane Sylvain with Heat Walking with Grasshoppers.
Thanks. This may be a little more esoteric than usual because I forgot my reading glasses. So if I start sounding like I'm either reciting Finnegan's Wake or speaking in tongues, you'll know why. It's kind of weird, like, I shouldn't, I have the bad habit of procrastinating because I am a longtime member of the citizen of the procrastination. And I was writing this like in late July and early August. And now I'm like reading my descriptions about the weather then and going like, is this science fiction? But try to cast your mind back to July. So, heat walking with grasshoppers. I'm staggering around on my afternoon heat walk, theoretically seeking philosophical insights into life in the Anthropocene. I can't not yet learned how to pronounce that. But actually, I'm thinking about how I'm not thinking. Not just because I'm heat fuddled, but because the grasshoppers are so distracting. Popping like popcorn in the bright, brittle grass and companionably picnicking on their roadkill flattened kin. I talk about grasshoppers, but what's there to say? They hop and they eat, and they hop and they eat, and they die, and they eat each other. If Kipling wrote a Just So story, How the Grasshopper Got Its Name, it would be really short. Because it hops in grass, duh. So I quit thinking and keep walking because it's summer and I'm hot. I didn't mean to whinge about heat, yet write what you know, they say. And in July, I don't know anything except how hot I am. It's how we introduce ourselves. Hi, we say. I'm hot. I'm hot too, we reply. And we'd embrace in solidarity like long-lost family, except that our physical boundaries are already dissolving in the heat, and we'd melt and merge into each other, like gravy slithering into mashed potatoes, only sweatier and less tasty. I try not to complain, yet refuse to stop doing it. Because one of the most admirable things about humanity is also one of the scariest. We're too darn adaptable for our own good. We'll get used to anything if we're fed and entertained. If ill-tempered aliens began lobbing asteroids at us, like gigantic geologic volleyballs, taking out every third house and leaving naught but blackened craters and a few lumps of smoldering charcoal, we'd freak out for maybe 3 days and then adapt. There go the Hendersons, we'd say. As the house on the corner explodes and tentacled aliens emerge to devour the inhabitants and their little dogs. I'll miss those dogs, we'll say. Sweeping the smoking fragments off the driveway. They were so cute. USA should stand for Unified State of Amnesia. But there it is. We forget and we adapt. Well, it's always hot in summer, we say, because yes, it is always hot in summer. But wait, no, it is never this hot in summer. It's never been this hot in summer. It is not supposed to be this hot in summer, and it's going to destroy everything in the world we love. But who wants to hear that? If I buttonhole people like a landlocked ancient mariner, fixing them with wild and glittering eyes and waving copies of fire weather and the heat will kill you first, they'll sadly agree, yeah, it's hot, but then again, summer is always hot. Besides, it could be worse. Which is one of those things that's always true and yet somehow not at all comforting. Come winter, of course, they'll complain about cold, and I'll end up walloping them with my climate change tomes. Assuming I survive, if it gets any hotter, I'll wither and disintegrate like an old-fashioned vampire, or melt into Neapolitan ice cream like a Nazi in a Spielberg movie. Still, we adapt, largely by denial, of course, clinging to illusion and air-conditioned distractions and the hopeful delusion that somebody's bound to fix it sooner or later. We're like extras on the set of some overpriced disaster movie, scanning our phones as we wait for the director to yell, "Action!" so we can snag our snippet of screen time while fleeing from the incoming asteroids. It's easier to adapt if you ignore reality. People love Phoenix and Florida, but mainly because they rarely actually experience them. They zip from air-conditioned house into air-conditioned garage, into air-conditioned car, to air-conditioned businesses, rarely touching the earth itself. No molecules of organic reality dare breach the barriers of their sealed-off pods. Me, I manage without air conditioning, but only because I live in a drafty old tree-shaded house and work from home starting before dawn. Because yes, I am hiding from the heat too. Until I do go outside and get flattened by it, splattered and scorched like batter in an overheated waffle iron. And that's partly why I keep doing this, facing reality in my heat walks, or trying to, no matter how toasty it is. If the temperature's swinging in the hammock of the sweet, balmy 80s, I think, it's fine. Why is everyone worried? Until reality sets in, as it does with surprising rapidity. By another mile, it's up in the 90s, and I'm yearning for the next patch of shade and guzzle of water. Nothing moves, except grasshoppers. A brief rest, and I'm up and moving. They'll devour me if I stop. But it gets hotter. Is the asphalt melting? Everything wavering and wobbling in the heat. Has the world gone all surrealist? Are my crutches melting? No, I'm melting. That splattering sound is brain cells running out of my ears and plopping in puddles on the pavement where grasshoppers gleefully lap them up. My bones deal a quiz like a Salvador Dali. More pauses, more water. And yes, it's hot, but I keep walking. My mileage varies, but I keep walking. Meaning, yes, I'm adapting too. Mainly because I know it will get better, at least briefly, at least later today. Later, I'll rest by the river and forget to grumble as the long blue shadows slide out from underneath trees, golden light thickening like honey, and purple clouds on the horizon, muttering about imaginary rain. cottonwoods lit by the westering sun, luminous against stormlit sky. And I'll be tired and hot and everything will hurt, but I'll also be happy. And so I keep going. Does that mean I'm in denial too? Well, yes, but also just taking a break. I lack the grasshopper's energy. And besides, I need to remember why all of this matters. I want to love what's here while it's here, even as I mourn and fight like hell for everything we're losing. It's my home too, I tell the grasshoppers. So I keep walking and also complaining. After all, a person can do both. Thank you.
Who knew doom could be so much fun? Thank goodness for writing, and thank goodness for Diane Sylvain. Our next reader is Steve Harper. Steve Harper is a retired lawyer who, along with his wife, Paula, have had the good fortune to live the past 42 years on a small rural acreage north of Hotchkiss. Among varied non-legal pursuits, Steve dabbles at such things as farming and writing, and sometimes writing about farming. Let's welcome Steve with his story, Burning Ditch.
I appreciated Allie's explanation of how the readers and the pieces were selected anonymously. It makes me feel less like the token old white guy. So this is a personal essay about something that's kind of like a rite of spring in these parts. It's called Burning Ditch. He set out to burn his ditches as he did each spring. He knelt on his left knee while drawing a book of paper matches from his right front jeans pocket. The scrunch sound triggered by his posture caused him to notice how last summer's vegetative bounty, out of reach of his mowers, had been reduced to a disarray of tinder-dry, paper-thin growth. Weeds, he now called them. Weeds, allowed to wither, dry out, and die through the winter's smashing snows and the spring's desiccating winds. Weeds that, left to their devices, would impede the flow of his irrigation water. He plucked the match from the book, closed the lid, and hesitated. He knew from experience what the immediate future would bring, and he had to be ready for it. He understood that he was meddling with the destructive attributes of a dangerous, mysterious energy as a tool to cleanse his irrigation ditches. He scanned up and down the ditch bank. A slight breeze tweaked the puffy ends of two cattail stalks. Then it became still again, still enough that time lingered. The intermittent breeze was welcome. It would help spread the fire gradually. But winds, especially sudden, unpredictable winds, were his enemy. He recalled that in past years he'd set fire to things he didn't mean to burn, like a row of pear trees which lay far enough from the reach of the flames he'd set when it was calm, but not so when a rogue wind whipped his fire into an unruly blaze, fanning hot tendrils that nipped at the tree trunks, baked the tissue, and gradually choked the trees to death. That same gust of wind caused a neighbor's ditch fire to ignite a wooden shed, he recalled, prompting a visit from the already taxed volunteer fire department. In deference to these experiences, an old towel soaking in a 5-gallon bucket of water stood guard behind him. A burst of adrenaline bathed the lining of his stomach as he scratched the match head against the striking pad. Nothing happened, although the previously unspoiled pad was now blemished by the red streak left from the aborted attempt. He took a deep breath and struck again. This time, the match burst open in a bright, silvery white explosion, like a small sparkler, heaving off a puff of pale blue smoke as he sucked in the sulfurous odor. He froze, entranced, until the flame relaxed and began crawling up the match, threatening his thumb and forefinger. No wind. It was time. He dropped the match to a level about 3 inches above the ground where a mass of dried orchard grasses congregated. Instantly, the yellow-orange energy spilled from the match onto the clump, sputtered in fits and starts until the fire took charge. Minutes later, the fiery mass was sofa-sized, consuming dried plants at a frenetic pace, spitting off chunks of ash borne on internally created winds. It produced an ominous roar and an acrid bluish-gray smoke. The leading edge of the fire slowly crawled up the ditch in what appeared to him as lazy waves of lapping lake water, gradually exposing the underbelly of the ditch, hidden since last spring. And there was something about this drama between destruction and rejuvenation that attracted him to the match. He could burn the universe, he thought, if it meant immediate resurrection like it did with his ditches. Today, he and his matches had become the masters. He felt in control of this small corner of his environment that, without his occasional intervention, would muddle along like all nature, chaotically without him. While the flames progressed, he leaned on the handle of his rake and recognized a familiar undercurrent, an amorphous agitation burbling somewhere beneath or around, in a place he couldn't touch or explain. He could never explain it. It was like his ditch fire, a perfect mix of fascination and fear. He was intrigued by it for sure, yet he feared that if he ever reached the destination of these sensations, if he could ever grasp them even slightly, that he might elope to a place not meant for minds. So he grabbed a bunch of dried grass with the teeth of his rake, flipped it upside down, ignited it with a fire already burning, and spread the flames to a new location on the ditch. He snuffed the advancement of some undisciplined flames by beating the fire front with the wet towel, and he focused even harder on the rumbling beneath, thinking that greater concentrated effort would define it more clearly, that it might suddenly emerge like his charred, cleansed ditch bottom. But it was never that clear or certain, never that evident. It was like that thing he did with distant stars. He couldn't see them if he looked directly at them, but for this, he just didn't trust a sideways glance. He removed his cap and wiped his brow with his shirt sleeve, and while he did so, he felt a twinge of regret at his fear-driven inertia to change anything in a way that would bring about real transformation into his life. He simply couldn't locate the match that would set fire to the impediments and produce the shift he needed. No ignition, no redemption, he concluded. No fire, no life. He studied his now smoldering ditch fire, brushed some pale, papery cinders from his shirt, folded his gloved hands over the end of the rake handle, and stared down the trail of smoke evaporating into the distance. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Our next reader is Nina Clouse. Nina Clouse is a holistic mental health counselor and a mother to 4 powerful kids. She helps run a free teen art club on Fridays at Clayworks, 5:30 to 7. And she is grateful to be in a very beautiful relationship with a handsome local artist. Let's welcome Nina with her story, Cultivating.
It's a really short poem, but this poem is about how even in the most beautiful relationships, or perhaps what makes the most beautiful relationships beautiful, is that we have to always remember why we chose each other, and then remember to choose each other again and again and again. And it's called Cultivating. Like most things of importance, this love has no finish line. We do not arrive at relationship and earn stagnant passivity with no repercussion. Relationship is a constant cultivation practice, a necessity to continuously win each other over, not out of lack of security, rather out of perpetual honoring. You bring me tea this morning, sweet with honey like the words you spoke to me last night when you said I have the most beautiful face. And you praise the tiger stripes of stretch marks splayed across my torso. Warm, dim light, anointing our ritual of touch, lips to skin and palms pressed firmly in here. But not only here, we cultivate. And when the harvest of our hearts come together, you pluck the ripe fruit from my mouth. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Those are all the words. I have no more words. Our final reader this evening is Laura Lee. Laura Lee Yates wrote her submission to this year's Harvest of Voices in memory of Massa Hall. Holly. Massa Holly. As a therapist in our small town, Massa kept a low profile, but her generous spirit touched many lives. Normally a novelist, Laura Lee discovered that completing this little piece of writing set her free to plunge into the third volume of her historical trilogy set in 1580s Ireland, Morocco, and Spain. Let's welcome Laura Lee with her story, Liar, Liar.
So I don't know if you can see this, and I don't know if you folks over in the Paradise can see it, but I brought this picture partly for myself, just to give me strength. Liar, liar. Years ago, in an earlier incarnation of this special event, everyone read about death. If the dog didn't succumb, it soon would. If Mom wasn't already on her deathbed or the marriage staggering on its last shaky legs, it was only a matter of time. A countdown. I was in that room when my fellow writers revealed such fascination with doom. And we worry about the teenagers reading dystopian novels. After that night, when we all felt like going home and slitting our wrists, I vowed I would submit no death stories, but I lied. Isak Dinesen said, "All sorrows can be born if you put them in a story." So this is a chart of two parallel lives that intersected for nearly 2 decades and then diverged. And it's not meant to make you sad. If it does, it's worth it. You can bear it. Born in 1952, we lived childhoods on opposite sides of San Francisco Bay. You at Catholic schools in the city, studying ballet and classical piano, and me, a county north, where the Golden Hills let me gallop, believing myself the Black Stallion. We were smart girls with great expectations and rebellious hearts. When puberty hit, you inhabited the summer of love in the park and the hate while I only visited. Drugs in Mid-Marin County mostly meant marijuana, while you hung out with the junkies and the tweakers. We chanted at the same San Francisco marches. What do we want? Peace now. And frolicked among the bay trees at the first Renaissance fairs at China Camp, where we probably passed each other, me thinking, oh, that one's definitely a witch. And you thinking, she's disguised as a flower child, but is really a fairy. Those years were our springboard when we were young in the 60s and everything was changing. but the seasons turned and I emigrated another county north, celebrated a kite and frisbee wedding in a pig pasture, lived on an apple ranch, and got my first horse. You lived off the grid in the woods and learned how to butcher a deer. My husband fulfilled his childhood dream when he went to sea for 55 days, but caught few fish, only saw the sun twice, and the captain drank all the booze the first week. You downed your own. Then I became a dancer too, but belly rather than ballet. Had a nervous breakdown and learned I possessed the power to heal, mostly. You went to work on a crab boat in Alaska, then created a store in Juneau where you sold beauty from all over the world. But you'd found your true calling, studying at Naropa until you were ready to counsel addicts and victims and others whose lives had spun out of control. We laugh about the Paonia vortex, but it sucked us both in, our trajectories entwining. We rented houses side by side. Still, we hadn't actually met, but somehow long auburn hair and Irish skin made us look enough alike that even though I carried several less inches and 20 pounds more, the dry cleaning lady tried to give me your laundry. You're Masa, right? You were never my therapist, though I knew you'd be the best I'd ever had. I made sure never to cross that invisible line, though my troubles were as deep as the others. You needed someone simply to be a friend and not a client, and that gets hard in a small town, especially when you have the gift. In the old days, you surely would have burned. I was married then to a blues musician who couldn't stop drinking. I know that was hard to watch, especially since you'd been there, done that, and moved on with great effort. Finally, he didn't, but I did. We each left our next-door rentals to buy our own little homes a few blocks apart, women living alone, walking the Stewart Ditch together, cooking meals, dressing up for fun in silk and velvet, and watching Foyle's War. When you needed a kidney transplant, the doctor turned down my offer. You look healthy despite your age, but too many kidney stones. But we all cheered when that gift from an old friend kept you going strong. But the therapeutic drugs left a time bomb ticking inside you. During COVID, we were a pod, laughing at Gilmore Girls, appreciating David White, cooking more dinners, and growing closer than ever. When vaccines arrived, you explored online dating, and we giggled over big-bellied, bearded bikers who wanted to take you for a ride. In time, a man popped up who you'd known from Boulder, someone you believed I would like. Lou and I clicked on the phone in person when he moved to town. The three of us barbecued together, but the dynamic changed when his cancer returned and he needed me more. Then the breakup. Not a text, but your letter, gracious yet firm. It was an adult decision, but reflected abandonment issues you never quite left behind. I was sad, yet we always knew the love remained. You deserved better. Then, as Lou began to lose his 15-year battle with lymphoma, you were diagnosed with bladder cancer. In a month, you were gone. And then I had to lose him without you. A full turn of the season since you moved on, surely into the embrace of the Blessed Mother. Harvest of Voices was your favorite night of the year, and I can see you in the audience, face intent on every word. Writing has proven to be my greatest teacher, and typing this taught me something important. At least it's important to me. Sometimes we write with our heads, and the narrative can be informative, gripping, persuasive, the words clever, witty, even wise. But on the very best days, we let go and write swiftly from our hearts, letting grief and memory and love lead the way. And those are the stories that carry us home.
Thank you, Laura Lee. Thank you to all of our readers this evening for sharing their stories. Thank you to all of you for being here to hold space for this, our watchers over at the Paradise Theater, the Blue Sage for coordinating this event, the Literary Committee for helping to make it happen, all of our volunteers. We want to wish you a very happy Harvest Festival. Thank you for joining us this evening. One more round of applause for all of our storytellers.